Nobody's coming for you, Brandon Pierce said, smiling. You're just a worker. Nobody cares about workers. Liam Carter looked at the three of them, expensive clothes, easy smiles. The kind of confidence that comes from never once facing a real consequence. And he felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear, something worse. The recognition that Brandon was probably right. But he didn't look away. And that decision cost Brandon Pierce everything he thought he owned. If this story moves you, hit subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story has traveled. Let's get started. The summer Liam Carter turned 23, he was doing what he always did, showing up before anyone else and leaving after everyone had gone home. That was the rhythm of his life. Clock in, work. Clock out, repeat. Not because he loved the grease under his fingernails or the way the Arizona heat turned the garage into something close to a furnace by 2 in the afternoon. He did it because his mother's rent was 3 weeks late and his father had been in the ground for 8 months and there was nobody else. Red Mesa was the kind of town that sounded romantic from a distance. Desert sunsets, open roads, the smell of sage in the dry air. Up close, it was a town where the same 15 families had controlled everything for 3 generations and everyone else just worked around them. Liam had grown up knowing exactly where he stood in that arrangement. His father had been a mechanic. His grandfather had been a ranch hand. The Carters didn't own things in Red Mesa. They fixed them. Daniel Walker's shop sat at the edge of the main road, a low concrete building with a hand-painted sign that had been faded by the sun for so long, nobody could remember what color it had originally been. Daniel had been there as long as anyone could recall. He opened at 7, closed when the work was done, charged fair prices, and didn't talk much. The older men in town respected him in the quiet way people respect someone who has never once asked for anything. The younger people barely noticed him. He was just part of the background, like the water tower and the cracked sidewalk outside the diner. Liam had started there 2 years ago, answering a handwritten card in the window. No experience necessary. Willing to learn. That was all it said. He'd walked in expecting to be turned away. Daniel had looked at him for about 4 seconds, asked him one question, "You show up on time?" And when Liam said yes, Daniel had handed him a work shirt and pointed at an engine that needed pulling. It wasn't glamorous. Most days it wasn't even interesting, but Daniel was patient in the way of someone who had learned things the hard way and didn't want to watch someone else go through the same process. He taught Liam without making him feel stupid for not knowing. He corrected him without humiliating him. And in the 8 months since Liam's father died, Daniel had never once brought it up directly, but he'd started leaving a covered plate in the small office refrigerator on Mondays, and he'd quietly adjusted Liam's hours so the kid could take his mother to her Tuesday appointments. Liam noticed all of it. He just didn't know how to say thank you for something that was never acknowledged out loud. That Tuesday in July started the same as every other Tuesday. Daniel had a parts run up to Flagstaff. He'd be back by 4. Liam had a list of jobs, a cooler with 2 bottles of water and a sandwich, and the radio playing something low from the corner shelf. There were 2 bikes in the bays, 1 straightforward cable replacement, 1 transmission problem that was going to take most of the afternoon. He'd already pulled the cable bike and had parts laid out on the workbench when he heard the vehicles pull up outside. He didn't look up right away. Customers came in all the time. He finished tightening the connection he was working on, wiped his hands on a shop rag, and turned around. 3 of them. He recognized them immediately because in Red Mesa you knew the Pierce family the same way you knew bad weather. You didn't have to be looking for it. It found you. Brandon Pierce was 25, the youngest son of Gerald Pierce, who owned the largest real estate holdings in the county and sat on every board that mattered in a 3-town radius. Brandon had gone to college somewhere back east for 2 years before coming home, and he carried those 2 years like a credential. He was tall, tan, wearing a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up in a way that was clearly calculated to look casual. He had friends on either side of him. Liam knew one of them as Kyle Mercer, whose father was the county attorney, and the other was a guy called Dex, who nobody knew much about except that he went wherever Brandon went and laughed at whatever Brandon said. They looked around the shop with the expressions of people touring a zoo. "Anybody working here?" Brandon asked. Not to Liam, to the room, like Liam wasn't worth addressing directly. "I'm here," Liam said. "Can I help you?" Brandon turned to look at him then, and there was something in that look that Liam had felt before without ever being able to name it. The assessment, the instant calculation, the decision made in about 2 seconds that this person is not someone I have to be careful with. "We got a bike," Brandon said. "Needs to look at it." "What's the issue?" Brandon shrugged. "That's your job, isn't it? Figuring that out." Liam kept his voice even. "Usually helps to know what the owner noticed. Sounds, handling problems, warning lights." "It runs rough," Kyle said. He was leaning against the door frame with his arms crossed. Brandon noticed it running rough. "Okay, which bike is it?" Brandon jerked his head toward the parking area outside. Liam walked out. There was a motorcycle parked between Brandon's truck and Kyle's SUV, a mid-range cruiser, nothing special, couldn't have been more than 2 years old. Liam crouched down and looked it over. He checked the exhaust pipe, the chain tension, the tire pressure by eye. He wasn't touching anything yet, just looking. "How long has it been running rough?" he asked. "Few weeks maybe," Brandon said. "Has it had its scheduled maintenance?" Silence. Liam looked up. Brandon was looking at Kyle. Kyle shrugged. Dex was on his phone. "You don't know," Liam said. "I don't track that," Brandon said. "That's what shops are for." Liam said, "I can take a look. Might be something simple, might need a few hours. You want to leave it?" "I want you to look at it right now. I have 2 jobs in the bays already." "I'm sure those can wait." Brandon smiled. It was a slow smile, the kind that is designed to remind you of something without saying it out loud. "My father knows Daniel Walker. We've been bringing vehicles here for years. I think Daniel would want you to take care of us." There it was. Liam had heard variations of that sentence his entire life in this town. The reminder that someone you work for owes someone else a favor, and that favor flows downward until it lands on you. "I'll finish the cable job," Liam said. "That's 40 minutes. Then I'll pull yours in." He went back inside. He heard them follow him. He went back to the workbench and picked up where he'd left off. He felt them standing behind him, not doing anything, just standing there. After a moment, he heard Brandon say something quiet to Kyle, and Kyle laugh. He didn't catch the words. He kept working. "Those tools look old," Brandon said. Liam didn't respond. "I'm serious. Some of that stuff looks like it's from the 70s. Does Daniel actually use that, or is it just decoration?" "It works," Liam said without turning around. "That's a low bar." Dex laughed this time. Liam felt the heat move up the back of his neck, but kept his hands moving. He knew what this was. He'd seen it before, just not directed at him this specifically, this deliberately. They were bored. They'd shown up to a small garage on a slow Tuesday afternoon and decided that watching a mechanic get irritated was more interesting than whatever else they had planned. He finished the cable job in 35 minutes instead of 40. He was working faster than he should have been, and he knew it, but something in the room was pulling his focus sideways, and he wanted the job done correctly and them outside. He put the cable bike back together, checked his work, started it to confirm, then cut it and moved toward Brandon's cruiser outside. "Okay," he said, "let me pull it in." He walked the bike in himself. It was when he was setting it on the center stand that Brandon walked over and picked up a wrench from the rolling tool chest. Not with intent, the way someone picks up a paperweight on someone's desk, just to handle it. "Put that back, please," Liam said. Brandon turned the wrench over in his hand. "These are Daniel's tools, right, not yours." "They're shop tools. Please put it back." "I'm just looking." Liam stopped what he was doing and straightened up. He looked at Brandon directly. "Sir, put the wrench down." Something shifted in Brandon's expression. The easy amusement tightened into something else. Nobody in his daily life talked to him the way Liam had just talked to him, flat, without apology, without the extra cushion of deference that people usually added when they wanted something or were afraid of something. Brandon set the wrench down, but not on the chest, on the workbench, across the garage. It was deliberate. The message was clear. "I'll do what I want where I want, and the distance between where I put this and where it belongs is the distance between your authority and mine." Liam picked it up, walked back, put it in its place on the chest. He turned back to the cruiser and started the diagnostic. For a few minutes, there was quiet, except for the sound of the engine cycling and Liam working. Then Brandon wandered over to the second bike in the bay, the one with the transmission issue, and touched the fuel tank. "Don't touch that," Liam said without looking up. "It's just sitting here. It's a customer's motorcycle." That's private." "Private." Brandon repeated the word with the inflection of someone finding it funny. He looked at Kyle. Private. He put his hand on the fuel tank again. Liam stood up and looked at him. They were about 8 feet apart. Brandon was 3 inches taller and probably 30 pounds heavier. Kyle and Dex were positioned behind Liam without having obviously moved there. Liam noticed that. "You need to stop touching the equipment," Liam said. "Or what?" And there it was, the question that wasn't really a question. The sentence that meant I have calculated that there is nothing you can do, and I want you to know that I have calculated it. Liam had a choice to make in about 3 seconds. He could back down. He could find some diplomatic angle, redirect, give Brandon a small victory, and hope they got bored and left. He'd seen other people do it. He understood the logic. Pick your battles. The Pierces don't lose in this town. Gerald Pierce owns 2 of the county commissioners and the biggest employer between here and the interstate. What are you going to do, really? What he did was hold his ground. "I'm going to ask you to leave," Liam said. "I can't work on your bike under these conditions." The room went very quiet. Brandon looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled again, and this smile was different from the first one. The first one had been the smile of someone who thought he was going to be entertained. This one was the smile of someone who had just decided that the entertainment was going to be more interesting than he'd originally planned. "You're asking us to leave," Brandon said. "Yes." "From a shop where my family has brought business for 15 years. "Yes." "Because you're uncomfortable. Because you're interfering with my work and touching a customer's property." Brandon leaned against the bay door frame. He pulled out his phone. "You know what I think? I think Daniel Walker would be very interested to hear how his apprentice talks to long-term customers. I think a call to Daniel right now might change your whole afternoon." "Then call him," Liam said. That surprised Brandon. He'd expected the phone to land like a threat. Liam could see the slight recalculation happening behind the other man's eyes. "I will," Brandon said, but he didn't dial. "And while you're deciding," Liam said, turning back to the cruiser, "I'm going to finish this diagnostic. If you want to wait outside, I'll have an assessment for you in 20 minutes. He turned his back on them. He heard Dex say something low to Kyle. He heard Brandon shift position. He kept his hands moving and his breathing steady. He was aware that his heart was doing something unpleasant against his ribs, but he kept his face pointed at the engine and his hands on the task. He had just finished pulling the air filter when he heard Brandon say, "You know what your problem is?" Liam didn't respond. "Your problem is you think showing up is the same as mattering." Brandon's voice had dropped the performance now. It was quieter, and that made it worse somehow. "You come in here every day. You work your little hours. You think that means something. It doesn't. You're replaceable. Daniel could find 10 people who could do what you do. He probably just hasn't gotten around to it yet." Liam set the air filter on the bench. He turned around. "Are you going to leave?" he said. "Or do I need to call the non-emergency line and ask for a deputy?" The temperature in the room changed. Kyle uncrossed his arms. Dex put his phone away. Brandon stood very still. "You're calling the cops," Brandon said slowly, "on us. I'm asking you to leave. If you don't, then yes." Brandon moved then, not toward the door. He walked toward the rolling tool chest, and before Liam could get there, he grabbed the handle and shoved it sideways. It hit the concrete with a sound like a car crash. Tools scattered across the floor. Wrenches, sockets, pliers, screwdrivers, sliding and skidding into the bays under the workbench across the entire length of the garage. The noise was enormous in the enclosed space. Liam didn't move. He stood and looked at Brandon. "Oops," Brandon said. Kyle laughed. The sound of it bounced off the concrete walls. "That was an accident," Brandon said. "Clumsy of me. You should really organize this place better. Tool chest that close to a walkway, someone's going to knock it over." Liam looked at the tools on the floor. A lot of them were Daniel's. Some of them were older than Liam, bought years before he was born, kept in good condition because Daniel maintained everything he owned. A socket set that Liam had seen Daniel use 100 times was scattered across 3 feet of greasy concrete. He looked back at Brandon. He didn't speak. "What?" Brandon said. "You got something to say it." And here was the thing that Liam would think about later, would turn over and examine from every angle in the months that followed. He didn't feel rage. What he felt was something much colder. A clarity, like the moment before something finally breaks and the waiting is over. He walked to the corner of the shop where the landline phone sat on the wall. He picked it up. He dialed 911. Not the non-emergency line, 911. "There is a situation at Walker's Repair on Mesa Road." he said when the dispatcher answered. I need someone out here. He set the phone down. Brandon's jaw had tightened. You just called 911. Yes. For a tipped tool chest. For a refusal to leave after being asked damage to property and aggressive behavior. Yes. Kyle moved toward the phone on the wall. Liam stepped between him and it. Kyle stopped. Kyle stopped. You are making a serious mistake, Brandon said quietly. You understand that, right? My father. Your father isn't here, Liam said. You are. And what you are doing right now in this shop is being recorded. That stopped all three of them. Brandon's eyes went to the corners of the ceiling. There was a camera in the upper left corner of the main bay. Daniel had put it in 3 years ago after someone had driven off without paying. It was small and the housing was dark and dusty enough that most people didn't notice it. Brandon had not noticed it. That camera, Liam said, has been recording since you walked in. The silence that followed was different from all the silences before it. Brandon looked at the camera for a long time. Then he looked at Liam, and Liam watched the calculation happen, the inventory of what had been done, what had been said, how it would look on footage, who might see it, what the exposure was. Delete it, Brandon said. No. That footage is on private property. In a business, recording customers is legal in Arizona. I know that. Daniel made sure I knew that. Kyle grabbed Liam's arm, not hard, but firmly pulling him sideways. Liam pulled back and Kyle tightened his grip, and now Liam's shoulder was wrenched and he was being moved toward the back wall, and he heard Brandon say, find where it records to. And Dex was pulling open cabinet doors along the back wall looking for a DVR or a laptop. Liam said, stop. His voice was loud in the garage. Kyle didn't stop. What happened next was fast. Liam had never been in a fight in his life. He didn't know any techniques. What he knew was that Kyle's grip was on his left arm and his right arm was free, and there was a metal shelf bracket on the wall 2 feet to his right. He grabbed the bracket with his free hand, not as a weapon, just as an anchor, and used it to wrench himself sideways, breaking Kyle's grip. He stepped back until he had the workbench behind him. All three of them were looking at him. The deputy is going to be here in about 6 minutes, Liam said. He was breathing harder now, but he kept his voice level. Whatever you do in the next 6 minutes is also on that camera. Dex had stopped opening cabinets. Brandon was very still. Walk out, Liam said. Right now. Get in your vehicles and leave. The deputy arrives. I tell him it was a misunderstanding tool. Chest got knocked over by accident. Everything's fine. You drive away. That's the offer. He watched Brandon think. He watched Brandon look at the camera again. He watched Brandon calculate the distance between what had already happened and what could still be contained. And then very slowly, Brandon Pierce smoothed the front of his shirt with both hands, the way someone composes themselves before walking into a room full of people, and he said, Dex, Kyle, let's go. They left. Liam stood in the middle of the garage surrounded by scattered tools and listened to the vehicles back out of the lot and drive away. His shoulder was aching from where Kyle had grabbed it. His hands were not entirely steady. He lowered himself onto the metal stool near the workbench and sat there breathing. When the deputy arrived 7 minutes later, a woman named Santos, who had been driving these roads for 12 years, Liam was still sitting on that stool. She walked in, looked around at the scattered tools, looked at Liam, and said, You wanted to tell me what happened? He told her. All of it. He kept his voice flat and factual, the way his father had taught him. When you're talking to official people, take the emotion out of the words. Let the facts do the work. She took notes. She asked questions. At some point, she said, You have footage. And he showed her the camera and told her where the DVR box was, which was in the locked bottom cabinet in the corner that Dex had not gotten to. She was there for 40 minutes. When she left, she had a statement and a case number, and the footage was secured. She said someone would be in touch, the way they always say, which in Liam's experience usually meant nothing would happen. He spent the next hour picking up Daniel's tools off the concrete floor, checking each one, cleaning off of the ones that had landed in grease, organizing them back into the chest. He found a socket that had rolled under the bike lift and had to use a magnetic wand to retrieve it. He found a pair of needle-nose pliers that had slid under the workbench 6 feet from where they started. He was still picking up tools when Daniel Walker's truck pulled into the lot. Daniel came through the bay door and stopped. He looked at the tool chest, which was back in position, but had a visible dent in one corner now. He looked at the organized tools that Liam was still sorting. He looked at Liam's shoulder, which Liam was unconsciously favoring. "Tell me," Daniel said. Liam told him, same way he'd told Santos, flat, factual. He left out how scared he'd been because that wasn't relevant. He mentioned the camera footage the deputies visit, the case number. Daniel listened without interrupting. His face didn't change much while Liam talked. He had the kind of face that had learned not to broadcast. When Liam finished, Daniel stood quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Brandon Pierce." Not a question. "Yes," Liam said. Daniel nodded slowly. He looked at the dented corner of the tool chest. "Are you hurt?" "My shoulder's sore. It's fine." "Go home, Liam. I haven't finished the transmission job. Tomorrow, go home. Put some ice on that shoulder." Daniel pulled his phone from his shirt pocket and looked at it for a moment in the way of someone considering something. Then he looked back at Liam. "You stood your ground." "I don't know if that was the right call." "Didn't ask if it was the right call," Daniel said. "I said you stood your ground." Liam looked at him. There was something in Daniel's voice that hadn't been there before. He couldn't name it exactly. It sounded like something between respect and a much older sadness, like a door opening into a room that had been kept closed for a long time. "Go home," Daniel said again. "I'll lock up." Liam got his bag from the office and walked out to his truck. He drove 3 blocks before he had to pull over. Not because anything was wrong, just because his hands were shaking and he figured he should let them shake before he drove any further. He sat there in his truck on the empty side street and let everything that had been running on adrenaline catch up with him. The 3 of them in the shop. The tools hitting the floor, Kyle's grip on his arm. The 6 minutes waiting for the deputy with nothing between him and them except a camera they were thinking about destroying. He thought about what Brandon had said. "Your problem is you think showing up is the same as mattering." He sat with that for a while. Then he started the truck and drove home. What he didn't know, what he had no way of knowing sitting in that truck on that empty street, was that while he'd been picking up Daniel's tools off the concrete floor, Daniel Walker had been standing in the locked office with his phone to his ear, and the conversation he was having had lasted 11 minutes, and when it ended, something had been set into motion that hadn't moved in nearly 20 years. Something that Red Mesa was completely unprepared for. Brandon Pierce had spent his whole life in this town knowing exactly where every wall was and exactly how much room he had to operate inside them. He knew who his father could call. He knew which judges had eaten dinner at their house. He knew the particular geography of consequence in Red Mesa, the way someone knows the layout of their own house in the dark by memory, by feel, by the confident certainty that nothing would surprise them. What Brandon Pierce did not know was that one of the walls he had always assumed was just a wall was actually a door, and Daniel Walker had just opened it. By 9 o'clock that evening, Liam's phone had 17 missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize. He didn't answer any of them. He iced his shoulder and ate dinner with his mother and told her work had been a rough day, which was true and nothing else because she worried enough already. I was in bed by 10 and asleep by 10:15, which surprised him because he'd expected to lie awake 4 hours. He slept the specific deep sleep of someone who had been afraid and had not run. And 40 miles away and 80 miles away and in 3 different directions from Red Mesa, phones were ringing. Engines were warming up. People who had known Daniel Walker for longer than Liam had been alive were listening to the same short, quiet voice say the same short, quiet thing. There was a problem in Red Mesa. He needed people to know. Liam went back to work the next morning the same way he always did early before Daniel arrived, because that was the habit, and habits were what kept him functional when everything else felt uncertain. He unlocked the bay door, turned on the lights, pulled the transmission bike back into position, and got to work. His shoulder had stiffened overnight the way injuries do when you finally stop moving, and every time he reached across the engine, he felt the ache of it. He didn't mention it when Daniel arrived at 7:15. Daniel didn't ask. They worked through the morning in the same easy quiet that had defined the last 2 years. The radio, the sound of tools, occasional questions about a job, a part number, a spec. Normal, completely normal, except for the fact that Daniel checked his phone 4 times between 7 and 10, which was unusual. Daniel was not a phone checker. He kept it face down on the corner of the desk and looked at it maybe twice a day. By 11, Liam had the transmission diagnosis completed and was writing up the customer notes when Daniel came out of the office and stood in the bay doorway in a way that meant he had something to say. "I had a conversation last night," Daniel said. Liam looked up. About yesterday, about yesterday, about Brandon Pierce, about what happens next. Daniel, you don't have to do anything. Deputy Santos has the footage. There's a case number. I know what Santos has, Daniel said. I also know how things move in this county when the name Pierce is attached to them. I've lived here long enough to know that a case number isn't the same as a case. Liam set his pen down. What kind of conversation did you have? Daniel leaned against the doorframe. I was quiet for a moment in the way of someone choosing words the way a carpenter chooses wood, not for speed, for fit. I had a life before this shop, Daniel said. Before Red Mesa, before the faded sign and the cable jobs and the Tuesday parts runs. I've mentioned that to you before, I think. You mentioned you moved here from somewhere else. You never said much more than that. No, Daniel said, I didn't. He looked out toward the road. There are things in a man's past that he puts down on purpose. Not because he's ashamed of them exactly. More because carrying them into every new room makes it hard to actually be in the room. You understand what I mean? I think so. I put some things down when I came to Red Mesa. I built something different here. Something quieter, something I'm proud of. He paused. But quiet isn't the same as gone. And last night I made a call to someone I haven't called in a very long time. Liam waited. I told them what happened, Daniel said. I told them about you, about what you did and how you handled it. He finally looked directly at Liam. They're going to want to come here. I want you to be ready for that. Who's coming? Liam asked. Daniel picked up a socket from the workbench and turned it in his hand for a moment, then set it back down. People I trust, he said. People who still trust me. That's all I'll say for now. I went back into the office. Liam stood in the bay for a moment, then picked up his pen and went back to the customer notes. But his hands were writing the words on automatic while his mind was running the conversation back, looking at the specific weight of what Daniel had said and what he hadn't. Before this shop, before Red Mesa, something he'd put down on purpose. The transmission job took until 2 in the afternoon. While Liam was cleaning up a car he didn't recognize pulled into the lot. Not a truck, not a motorcycle. A regular sedan gray with an Albuquerque plate. A woman got out, late 40s, sharp-eyed, dressed practically. She walked into the shop like she'd been there before, which she clearly hadn't. Daniel Walker, she asked. Office, Liam said. She went to the office. The door closed. Liam kept working. 20 minutes later, she left. Daniel came out of the office and started checking parts inventory like nothing had happened. Liam watched him for a minute. Who was that? Someone who needed to know what was on that footage, Daniel said. He didn't look up from the inventory sheet. She was a lawyer. Daniel looked up then. He almost smiled. You can tell. The way she walked in and didn't apologize for interrupting, Liam said. And she had a legal pad. Her name is Carol Reeves, Daniel said. She's good at what she does. She's going to make a copy of that footage before anything gets complicated with the county record system. You think someone's going to try to lose it? I think Gerald Pierce has had things lost before, Daniel said. I think he's very good at it. And I think the fact that his son was stupid enough to do what he did in front of a camera doesn't necessarily mean the footage will still exist in 3 weeks. He set the inventory sheet down. Carol's going to make sure it does. Liam absorbed that. How do you know her old connection? Daniel picked up the sheet again. She owes me a favor, a significant one. That was all he said. But Liam was starting to understand that the phrase old connection in Daniel Walker's vocabulary was doing an enormous amount of work. The next thing that happened was that Brandon Pierce came back. Not that afternoon, not the next day. 3 days later on a Friday morning, while Daniel was in the office handling invoices, Liam was outside in the lot doing a tire pressure check on a customer's truck when Brandon's vehicle rolled in. Alone this time, no Kyle, no Dex. Brandon got out and leaned against his hood with his arms crossed, the way someone does when they're trying to look relaxed in accomplishing the opposite. I want to talk, Brandon said. I'm working, Liam said. It'll take 5 minutes. Liam finished the front left tire and moved to the front right. Talk while I work. Brandon glanced at the shop. The bay door was open and Daniel's office window faced the lot. Brandon lowered his voice anyway. Think we got off on the wrong foot the other day. Liam moved the gauge to the next valve. Okay. Look, I came in with a bad attitude. Things escalated. Brandon's voice had taken on a careful quality like someone reading from a prepared note while trying to sound like they weren't. The tool chest was an accident. I want to be clear about that. And the whole thing, the deputy, the report, I think we can resolve this without it going anywhere it doesn't need to go. The deputy took a report, Liam said. That's how it works. I don't control where it goes. You could speak to that, Brandon said. You could tell Santos it was a misunderstanding, that you overreacted. Things got confused. He paused. I'm not asking you for free. My father is willing to bring all the Pierce family vehicles here for the next 2 years. Full rate service, no negotiation. That's significant business for a shop this size. Liam capped the second tire and moved to the rear. You're offering Daniel business, he said. In exchange for me telling a deputy that I overreacted when your friend grabbed my arm and you knocked over a tool chest worth $3,000. It was an accident, Brandon said again. His voice had an edge in it now. You shoved it deliberately, Liam said. I watched you do it. It's on the footage. The name of the footage in the conversation was like touching a bruise. Brandon's jaw moved. That footage, Brandon said, was taken without our knowledge. Arizona law doesn't require notice for recording in a business open to the public. Brandon stared at him. You looked that up. Carol Reeves looked it up, Liam said. She was very thorough. The name landed like a small charge. Liam watched Brandon's expression move through something, recognition, recalculation. The specific unease of someone who has just learned the territory is more complicated than they thought. Reeves, Brandon said slowly. She's the one handling the footage, Liam said, for preservation in case anything happens to the original in the county system. Liam moved to the last tire. His heart was moving fast again, but his hands were steady. I don't know who you think you're dealing with, Brandon said. His voice had dropped into something quieter and more dangerous than the loud performance from before. This was the real voice, the one he used when he wasn't performing. My father has resources that would make your head swim. If this goes forward, if you push this, we will respond. And we will respond in ways that affect more than just you. This shop. The people who depend on this shop. Liam stood up and looked at him. Are you threatening Daniel Walker's business? He said. I'm telling you how things work. Because that's also on record now, Liam said. This conversation. Brandon looked at him for a long beat. Then his eyes moved to Liam's shirt pocket where the outline of Liam's phone was visible. The recording app. Liam had started it when Brandon got out of the car. Brandon stepped back. He opened his car door. He was going to say something else. Liam could see it in his face, the need to have the last word, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the phone, maybe it was Reeves, maybe it was something else he'd already run into that Liam didn't know about yet. He got in his car and left. Daniel appeared in the bay doorway behind Liam. He'd been there for part of it. He'd heard the threat. Good, Daniel said quietly. Good that he threatened you. Good that it's on your phone. Daniel looked down the road where Brandon's car had gone. He's running out of soft options. That's when people get loud. Loud as evidence. Liam turned around. Daniel, what is going on? I need you to be straight with me. You made a call, someone drove from Albuquerque, and now Brandon Pierce is personally coming here to ask me to recant. What did you set in motion? Daniel looked at him for a moment. There was something in his expression that Liam had not seen before and couldn't quite read the look of a man deciding whether the door he's been leaning against is one he's ready to open all the way. Come inside, Daniel said. They went into the office. Daniel sat behind the desk and Liam sat in the chair across from it that was usually reserved for customers. Daniel put his hands flat on the desk. I was born in Tucson, Daniel said. I was 20 when I joined, 23 when I became a full member. I rode with the Hells Angels for 16 years. Liam went still. Sergeant-at-Arms for 9 of those years, Daniel said, which means I was responsible for discipline, for order, for making sure things were handled correctly inside the chapter. He said it the way someone states a fact, not proud, not ashamed, just accurate. I was good at it. I was good at it because I understood that real authority isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to be there. Liam said nothing. I left when I was 36, Daniel said. Clean exit. I'd earned that. Not everybody does. I walked away because I wanted something different. I wanted to be useful to people in a way that was mine, not built on anything else. I came to Red Mesa because nobody knew me here. I built this shop. I've been here ever since. The call you made, Liam said slowly, you called the chapter. I called Marcus Reed, Daniel said. He's been president of the Arizona chapter for 11 years. We've been friends for 30. When I left, Marcus gave me his word that if I ever needed anything, I was to call. I never called. Daniel paused. Until 3 days ago. Liam sat with that. The office felt smaller than it usually did. What did you tell him? The truth. What happened here? What Brandon Pierce did and what you did in response. And one other thing. Daniel's eyes were steady. I told him you were worth knowing about. There was a weight to that sentence that Liam didn't entirely know what to do with. He sat quietly for a moment. What does Marcus do? Liam asked. What does coming here mean? It means, Daniel said, that the people who matter in a situation like this will know the situation. Brandon Pierce has operated in this county because nobody with real standing has ever pushed back. His father controls the local apparatus, the commissioners, the courts, the record systems. But Gerald Pierce's authority is local. It stops at the county line. Daniel leaned forward slightly. The people I'm talking about operate everywhere. Liam looked at the wall behind Daniel's desk at the framed photo he'd always assumed was just a mountain landscape. For the first time, he looked at it carefully. It wasn't a landscape. It was a group of riders on a long, empty road taken from behind the shot, so distant that the figures were small. Somewhere in that distant group was a 30-year-old version of the man sitting across from him. Is this going to be safe? Liam asked. Not for himself. For you, for the shop. Safer than letting Brandon Pierce think what he's doing doesn't have consequences, Daniel said. Liam nodded slowly. Okay. There's something else, Daniel said. He opened the bottom desk drawer and put a folded piece of paper on the desk between them. Liam picked it up. It was a printed list. 12 names, 12 dates, 12 different types of incidents. A restaurant worker, a gas station attendant, a woman who ran a bookkeeping service out of her home, a teenager who'd worked at a car wash for the summer. The dates ran back 4 years. Every incident involved Brandon Pierce or one or both of his associates. Where did this come from? Liam asked. Carol Reeves, Daniel said. She's been collecting it informally for 2 years. Cases that were reported and then dropped. Complaints that disappeared from the system. People who withdrew their statements without explaining why. He tapped the paper. None of these people had anyone standing behind them. Liam read through the list again. The restaurant worker was 19. The teenager at the car wash was 17. One incident description was 2 words: property destruction. Another was 3 verbal assault intimidation. Did any of these people know each other? Liam asked. No, Daniel said. That's exactly the point. Brandon does this in pieces, one at a time, each piece too small to look like a pattern, each person too isolated to compare notes with anyone else. He took the paper back and folded it. What you did 3 days ago, calling 911, keeping the footage, talking to Santos, that was the first time in 4 years anyone left a clean paper trail that didn't disappear. Liam thought about Brandon's visit that morning, the offer of 2 years of business. Quiet threat after Liam turned it down. The particular desperation of a man who has always been able to make things go away now, discovering that one of the things won't go. He's scared, Liam said. He should be, Daniel said. Is Gerald Pierce going to get involved directly? He already has, Daniel said. Carol's contact at the county records office told her this morning that the deputy's report from Tuesday has been flagged for administrative review. Standard process, apparently. Happens all the time. His voice was dry. Except it doesn't happen all the time. It happens when someone makes a call. Liam sat back in the chair. The picture was becoming clearer, and it was bigger than he'd understood when he was standing in the garage with tools scattered around his feet. They're going to try to bury the report, he said. They're going to try, Daniel agreed. Carol has a copy of the footage on 3 separate devices in 3 separate locations. And Marcus is already talking to someone in the state AG's office about a pattern of interference with local reporting. He paused. Things are moving quickly. Does Marcus know what Brandon threatened this morning? The business threat. He will in about 20 minutes, Daniel said. You're going to text me that recording right now. Liam sent it. That night, he drove home thinking about the list of 12 names. 12 people who had been alone in the moment it mattered. 12 reports that had gone nowhere. He thought about the 17-year-old kid at the car wash. He thought about whether that kid had stood his ground the way Liam had, or whether he'd lowered his head the way Brandon clearly expected everyone to, and whether it had made any difference either way. I thought about his father, who had spent 30 years fixing things that other people owned and had never once been thanked by anyone with a Pierce-level last name, and whether his father had ever been alone in a room with someone who had decided he didn't matter. I thought about how easy it would have been 3 days ago to let Kyle grab his arm and move him to the back wall, to let Brandon find the div, to write the whole thing off as the cost of keeping a job he needed in a town that didn't have many of them. He had not done that. He still wasn't entirely sure why. It hadn't felt like courage in the moment. It had felt more like the moment before you jump into cold water where stopping and going back would feel worse than going forward. He called his mother when he got home. She asked him how work was. He said good. She told him the neighbor's dog had gotten into the yard again, and he said he'd fix the fence on the weekend. They talked for 11 minutes about things that had nothing to do with any of what was happening. It was the best 11 minutes of his day. He went to bed. In the morning, there were two motorcycles parked across the street from the shop when he arrived. He noticed them. They were there when he opened the bay, and they were still there 2 hours later. He didn't know the riders. He couldn't see them clearly, but he had the distinct impression that they could see him. He mentioned it to Daniel when Daniel arrived. Daniel looked across the street without reaction. Good, he said. That means Marcus sent people early. They're watching the shop. They're watching the situation, Daniel said. There's a difference. By noon, 3 more motorcycles had joined the two. They were parked at intervals down the block, not bunched together spread out the way. You spread out when you're establishing coverage rather than making a social visit. Nobody came into the shop. Nobody approached. They were simply present. At 1:15, a vehicle Liam recognized as Gerald Pierce's personal car, a dark sedan that everyone in Red Mesa knew on sight because it was the most expensive thing that regularly drove through town, came slowly down the main road. It slowed further as it passed the shop. It didn't stop. It turned at the end of the block and passed once more, going the other direction. Liam watched it from the bay. He came to look, Daniel said from behind him. He saw the bikes, Liam said. Yes. Does he know what they mean? Gerald Pierce is 62 years old and he has been the biggest thing in this county for 25 years, Daniel said. He knows exactly what they mean. The dark sedan did not pass a third time. By 4 o'clock, there were 9 motorcycles visible from the shop's bay door. Liam counted them without meaning, to the way you count things when you're trying to understand the dimensions of something you've never experienced before. Or 9 riders who had come to a town of 8,000 people on a workday because a man they trusted had asked them to be present. I thought about Daniel on the phone 3 nights ago. Whatever he had said, however he had described Liam the tool chest, the 911 call, standing in the bay with Kyle behind him and not moving back. Apparently that description had been enough. He thought about being 23 years old and having that weight attached to you. I was not sure how he felt about it. Grateful was part of it. Humbled was part of it. And underneath both of those was something smaller and more honest, the fear that he had not done anything heroic that day, that he had simply been too stubborn to back down and had gotten lucky that the camera was there, that he was not the person the story seemed to be building him into. He said that to Daniel. Not all of it, just the last part. I don't know if I actually deserved any of this, he said. I just didn't leave. That's not the same as being brave. Daniel looked at him for a long moment. You think bravery is something separate from just not leaving, he said. That's exactly what it is. Every person on that list Carol gave us, you think they wanted to leave. You think they were comfortable leaving. They left because they were alone and the cost of staying felt bigger than they could carry. He put his hand briefly on Liam's shoulder, the undamaged one. You didn't leave, that's it. That's the whole thing. Don't make it more complicated than that. Liam nodded. He locked up at 6. The motorcycles were still there when he drove home. That night, the first of the calls came in, not to Liam's phone, to Carol Reeves' office, then to the county recorder's office through official channels. Then, according to what Daniel told him the next morning, to 2 different offices at the state level. Marcus Reed had been busy, and whatever Gerald Pierce had set in motion to bury the deputy's report had hit something it hadn't expected, something with more leverage, something that didn't operate within the boundaries of what Gerald Pierce controlled. The administrative review was canceled this morning, Daniel told Liam. The report stands. It's in the system, time-stamped correctly, and there are now 3 copies stored outside the county jurisdiction. Liam took that in. What happened? Someone at the state level asked a specific question about why a routine assault and property damage report required administrative review, Daniel said. In writing, which means the question is also on record. He set his coffee mug down. Gerald Pierce can apply pressure. What he cannot do is make pressure disappear once it's visible. He's going to escalate, Liam said. He already is, Daniel said. Brandon was picked up last night. Liam stopped. Arrested. Brought in for questioning. On the record with a lawyer present. About the incident here and about two of the other incidents on Carol's list. Daniel looked at him steadily. The people at the car wash and the bookkeeper. They were both contacted by Carol in the last 48 hours. Both of them agreed to speak again. Liam thought about those two people, the ones who had withdrawn their statements. Whatever had made them withdraw was still real. Whatever they'd been afraid of hadn't necessarily changed. They'd agreed to speak anyway. Why would they do that now when they didn't before? Liam asked. Carol told them one thing that was different this time, Daniel said. What? Daniel picked up his coffee. She told them they wouldn't be alone. The weight of that sentence settled in the room between them. Liam sat with it for a moment. Outside, two motorcycles went past on the road. They weren't stopping, they were just moving through. But their presence in this town, on this road, past this shop on this particular morning, it was not accidental. Gerald Pierce had built his authority on the assumption that the people he targeted would always be isolated, alone in their moment, facing something too big with too many tentacles and too many local systems to resist effectively. What he had not accounted for was a 60-year-old mechanic who had put down a part of his life 20 years ago, but never actually lost it. What he had not accounted for was the specific way that loyalty, real loyalty, the kind built across decades and tested in ways that can't be described at a dinner party, does not expire. Brandon Pierce had walked into a garage to humiliate a young worker for the entertainment of it. He had tipped over a tool chest and grabbed a mechanic's apprentice by the arm and stood in a room where a camera was recording and threatened a man who had more history and more reach than Brandon had ever taken the time to consider. He had thought Liam Carter was alone. He had thought Daniel Walker was just an old mechanic. He had been wrong about both. And in 3 days, everything that had grown from those two mistakes was still growing, spreading outward from Red Mesa in phone calls, informal requests, and 11-year-old loyalties in the quiet movement of motorcycles on desert roads. Liam went back to the transmission job that afternoon. He worked with his hands and kept his mind on the task. He had learned in the last several days that the best thing he could do while large events moved around him was to do his job correctly. When the transmission bike was finished, he started on an oil change for a retired school teacher named Mrs. Paulson, who had been a customer of Daniel's for 9 years, and who, when she came to pick it up, looked at the row of motorcycles down the block and then looked at Liam and said, "Something's different around here." "Little bit," Liam said. She smiled at him in the way of a woman who has seen enough of the world to know that some differences are improvements. "Good," she said. She paid and rode her bike home, and Liam watched her go and then turned back to the shop because there was still work to do. There was always still work to do. What he did not know, and what would become clear the following morning, was that Marcus Reed himself was now 3 hours away and moving closer. And he was not coming with 9 motorcycles. Marcus Reed arrived on a Thursday morning, and Liam knew it before he saw it because the sound changed. "I was in the middle of a brake job when the frequency of the road outside shifted. Not loud, not sudden, just different. The kind of different that registers in your chest before your brain catches up." He set the caliper down and straightened up and walked to the bay door and looked out. The first thing he saw was Daniel. Daniel was standing in the parking lot already, which meant Daniel had heard it too and had come out without saying a word to Liam, which meant Daniel had been expecting it. They came from the north end of Mesa Road first, then from the south, not racing, not performing, just moving at the steady pace of people who have no reason to hurry because they have already decided that they are going to arrive. Motorcycles, dozens of them. The sound built the way a storm builds you. Hear it before you see it, and then you see it, and for a moment your mind has trouble processing the scale of what your eyes are telling you. Liam counted to 30 before he stopped counting. They filled the road in front of the shop. They parked with the practiced ease of people who have ridden together long enough that positioning is automatic. No one directing traffic, no one calling instructions. They simply arranged themselves and cut their engines in a rolling sequence that started at one end and moved to the other like a wave going flat. And then it was quiet. That quiet was the most remarkable thing. 190 motorcycles, give or take, and the riders that came with them, and all of it going silent at once. The town of Red Mesa, which had been making its normal Thursday morning, sounds a delivery truck down the block. Someone's radio, 2 doors over the school crossing signal at the far intersection. All of that continued unchanged, but it felt distant now, behind something. Daniel stood in the lot, and a man separated from the group and walked toward him. Marcus Reed was not what Liam had imagined, and he'd been imagining for 2 days, so he'd had time to build a picture. The picture had been wrong. Marcus was somewhere in his early 60s, gray-haired, built the way men are built, when they've worked physically their whole lives and never stopped. Not large, exactly, just substantial in a way that has nothing to do with size. He walked without rushing. He had the kind of face that had processed a great deal of difficulty without letting any of it make him hard. His eyes, when they found Daniel, had something in them that Liam didn't have a word for. 20 years of distance compressed into a handshake. Daniel took his hand, and Marcus pulled him in briefly. One hand on the back of Daniel's neck, the way men embrace when they mean it and don't need to announce that they mean it. "Danny," Marcus said. "Marcus." Daniel stepped back and looked at him. "You brought the whole state." "Close," Marcus said. He looked at Liam. This is Liam," Daniel said. Marcus walked over to Liam and looked at him the way people look at someone when they're trying to reconcile a description with a person. Liam didn't look away. He'd learned from watching Daniel that looking away first costs you something you can't always get back. "How's the shoulder?" Marcus asked. Liam blinked. "Better. How did you—" Daniel mentioned it. Marcus's voice was level and unhurried. "Are you hurt anywhere else?" "No," Marcus nodded. Then he said, "You called 911. "Yes." "While they were still in the shop?" "Yes." Marcus looked at him for another moment. "Most people wait until after. Wait until it's over and then figure out what to do. You called while they were still there." He said it the same way Daniel had said you stood your ground, not as praise exactly. More as observation, a fact being filed. "I didn't think about it that way," Liam said. "I just did it." "That's usually how the right thing happens," Marcus said. He turned back to Daniel, and the two of them walked a few feet away and talked in voices too low for Liam to catch. Liam went back inside and stood in the bay and tried to figure out what to do with his hands. He picked up the caliper and set it down again. He checked a torque specification on the job sheet he'd already checked twice. Through the bay door, he could see the road, the rows of parked bikes, the riders moving around in small groups. Some of them were on phones. Some of them were just standing. One of them was eating something from a paper bag. They looked, he thought, like people who had decided to be somewhere and were comfortable waiting for whatever came next. A man came into the bay. Not Marcus. Younger, maybe early 40s, wearing a leather cut with road dust on the shoulders. He looked at the brake job on the lift and then at Liam. "Need a hand," he said. Liam stared at him. "With the brakes." "I used to do this," the man said. He nodded at the lift. "Before." He shrugged. "Old habit." "I've got it," Liam said. Then after a pause, "Thank you." The man nodded and leaned against the bay wall. He didn't leave. He just stood there in the comfortable way of someone keeping company, rather than company making an effort. After a minute, he said, "Daniel says you've been here 2 years. "Yeah." "He teach you the diagnostics, or did you come in knowing them?" "He taught me most of it." "He's good at that." The man was quiet for a moment. "He taught me how to rebuild a carburetor in 1987 in a parking lot in Tempe. I was 19 and I thought I knew everything. I did not know everything." Liam looked at him. "You rode with him?" "Long time ago." The man straightened. "Name's Walt." "Liam." "I know." Walt pushed off the wall. "Daniel thinks a lot of you, for what it's worth. And I've known Daniel a long time, so I know that's not nothing." He walked back out into the lot. Liam stood in the bay and put a wrench on a bolt and stood there holding it without turning it. He was 23 years old, and a man named Walt, who he'd never met before, and who'd ridden across some portion of Arizona, had just walked into his bay and told him that Daniel Walker thought a lot of him and that Daniel's opinion was not nothing. He turned the bolt. He kept working. Outside things were moving. He couldn't see all of it from the bay, but he could feel the shape of it. Multiple phones going. Marcus talking to two people simultaneously. One in person, one on a call, shifting between them with the ease of someone who manages complexity the way other people manage a calendar. A second vehicle had arrived, another sedan, different plate, a man Liam had never seen who went directly to Daniel's office and didn't come out for 40 minutes. At 10:45, Deputy Santos arrived. She pulled into the lot and sat in her vehicle for a moment, looking at the assembled motorcycles the way someone looks at something they need to classify before they approach it. Then she got out and went to Daniel, who walked her through the lot to where Marcus was standing. The three of them talked for about 15 minutes. Liam watched from the bay. He couldn't read the conversation by expression. Santos was professional. Marcus was unhurried. Daniel stood slightly back from both of them in the posture of someone who has made an introduction and is letting the introduced people find their own level. Then Santos came to the bay. She looked at the brake job. She looked at Liam. "How are you doing?" she asked. "I'm okay," he said. "Did you know this was coming?" "I was briefed this morning," she said. Marcus Reed contacted the sheriff's department yesterday evening. Professionally, he laid out the situation, the report that was flagged for review, the two additional complainants who've agreed to refile the footage. She paused. He was very thorough. "What did the sheriff say?" Santos looked at him steadily. "The sheriff is in a complicated position," she said. "Gerald Pierce has a long relationship with this office, but he doesn't have a relationship with the state AG, and he doesn't have a relationship with the Hells Angels legal network, and both of those things are now in the room." She glanced toward the lot. "The administrative review on your report was already canceled before I got here this morning. The report stands." "Daniel told me," Liam said. "What Daniel may not have told you is that Brandon Pierce's lawyer called the sheriff this morning, and the call did not go the way the lawyer expected." Santos said this without particular satisfaction, but also without trying to hide that she found it notable. "The sheriff told the lawyer that the department would be handling this by the book." Those were the specific words. "By the book." Liam set his wrench down. Why now when 4 years of complaints went nowhere?" "Because 4 years of complaints were individual and isolated and quiet," Santos said. "Because right now there are 190 motorcycles on Mesa Road, and there are 2 additional complainants who've refiled, and there is footage preserved in multiple locations, and there is a state-level inquiry into why local reports were being flagged." She looked at him. "Courage is contagious. That's not a pretty saying. It's operational. When someone holds the line, other people can use that line to stand on." She left. Liam stood in the bay for a moment. Then he picked up the wrench and went back to work because the brake job still needed finishing, and Mrs. Calloway was coming to pick up the car at 2. At 11:30, Gerald Pierce arrived. Liam heard the change in the lot before he saw the sedan. He came to the bay door. Gerald Pierce was 62 years old and dressed like someone who had board meetings before lunch on Thursdays. He got out of his sedan and looked at the motorcycles around him with the expression of someone who is very carefully not showing what they actually feel. His driver stayed in the car. He walked toward the shop. 2 of Marcus's riders stepped into his path without blocking it, just present. Gerald stopped. He looked at them. Then he looked past them to where Marcus was standing. "I'd like to speak to Daniel Walker," Gerald said. Marcus looked at him calmly. "Daniel's available," he said. "I'll let him know you're here." "I'm aware of who you are," Gerald said to Marcus. His voice was controlled. "I want to be clear that I'm here as a private citizen discussing a private matter." "You're welcome here as any of those things," Marcus said. "Daniel's in the office." Gerald Pierce walked through the lot and into Daniel's office. The door closed. Marcus stood outside the office window. Not listening just there, Liam watched all of this from 10 feet away. He had stopped pretending to work. Walt appeared next to him. "Hell of a Thursday," Walt said. "Yeah," Liam agreed. They stood together and watched the office window. Inside, Gerald Pierce sat across from Daniel Walker for 22 minutes. Liam timed it, and he couldn't hear a word of it. He watched the window and tried to read the shape of the conversation in the occasional movement of a hand, the set of Daniel's shoulder, the one moment where Gerald leaned forward with what looked like pressure, and Daniel sat back with what looked like patience. Then the door opened. Gerald came out first. He walked through the lot without looking at Marcus. He got in his sedan. The driver pulled out and the sedan moved slowly down Mesa Road, and the rows of motorcycles it drove between were motionless and quiet, and Gerald Pierce looked straight ahead and through the windshield the entire time. Liam went to the office. Daniel was standing at the window watching the sedan leave. "What did he say?" Liam asked. Daniel turned around. He looked like a man who had just finished something that had required a great deal of sustained effort. Not shaken, just finished. "He came to negotiate," Daniel said. "Negotiate what?" "A private resolution. The complaints disappear. We receive a settlement for the shop, a generous one. His word. Brandon enters a private counseling program, no public record. Daniel looked at Liam. He was persuasive. He's been doing this for a long time. What did you tell him? I told him that the decision wasn't mine. Liam stared at him. What do you mean it wasn't yours? I mean, Daniel said that the people whose complaints were filed are Carol's clients. That the people who refiled are making their own choices. That the state inquiry is not something I control. And Daniel paused. That the young man who called 911 while 3 people were still in the shop with him is the one who gets to decide how this ends. Liam stood very still. Me, he said. You, Daniel said. I told Gerald that. He didn't like it. What are my options? You take the settlement, the noise goes away, Brandon gets a private slap on the wrist, and everything returns to the way it was 2 weeks ago for everyone on Carol's list. Daniel's voice was neutral, not pushing. Or you don't. Liam sat in the customer chair. He thought about the 17-year-old at the car wash. He thought about the bookkeeper and the restaurant worker and the 10 other names on the list. He thought about what Santos had said. Courage is contagious. And then the other part, when someone holds the line, other people can use that line to stand on. He thought about what happened to the line if he took the money and the line went away. There are 12 people on Carol's list, he said. There are. If I take the settlement, what happens to their cases? Daniel said nothing, which was the answer, sir. Then I'm not taking it, Liam said. Daniel nodded once. He picked up his phone and sent a text, presumably to Marcus. He put the phone down. I want you to understand what that means, he said. Gerald Pierce does not accept rejection gracefully. He is going to find another angle. He is going to look for something to use against you, against your mother, against anyone he can reach. I know, Liam said. Do you, Tyrone? I know what it means to not have options, Liam said. I've been broke enough to understand what leverage feels like when someone's pointing it at you. I'm not going to make 11 other people go through this alone so I can take money that makes their situation worse. Daniel looked at him for a long moment. All right, he said quietly. Marcus knocked on the open office door and leaned in. He had been outside and he clearly knew what the text meant because he said, okay, then we move to the next part. He looked at Liam directly. We need you to do something. What? I need you to talk to the 2 people who refiled, Marcus said. Not about the legal strategy. Carol handles that. I need you to talk to them person to person because right now they have agreed to refile, but they're scared. They were scared enough to withdraw the first time. What changed was Carol telling them they wouldn't be alone. I want them to meet the reason that's true. Liam was quiet for a moment. You want me to be the reason? You are the reason, Marcus said. You called 911 while 3 people were still in the room. You kept the footage. You turned down Gerald Pierce's settlement 20 minutes ago. Those are facts. Facts help scared people stay steady. He paused. You willing? Hey, yeah, Liam said. I'm willing. Carol brought them to the shop at 2 o'clock after Mrs. Calloway had collected her car and the lot was quieter. Some of the riders had broken off to get food, to make calls, to do whatever people do when they're in a town for an extended stay. The shop had maybe 70 bikes parked within a block in various directions. Enough. The woman's name was Diane. She was 41, ran the bookkeeping service from her home, had 3 clients she'd almost lost because of the intimidation campaign Brandon had run against her after she'd asked him to leave her office. She had withdrawn her complaint because someone had left a note on her car that listed her daughter's school name and the time school let out. She had never told anyone about the note. She told Liam about it in the office, seated in the chair Gerald Pierce had sat in 90 minutes earlier, while Daniel and Marcus waited outside. Liam listened to her. He didn't offer counter-arguments. He didn't tell her it was okay. He didn't tell her that everything was going to work out because he didn't know that, and she would hear the falseness of it immediately. When she finished, he said, the note on your car, did you keep it? She looked at him. I threw it away. Do you remember exactly what it said? Word for word, she said. I'll remember it until I die. Write it down for Carol, he said, exactly as you remember it. The date, what the note said, the make and color of your car. Even without the physical note, that's a documented threat and it establishes a pattern. He paused. And I want you to know, Kamithawank, Marcus Reed has people at your daughter's school right now, as of this morning. They'll be there every day until this is resolved. Diane stared at him. Marcus arranged that, Liam said. I asked him to this morning after Carol told me about your situation. Diane's composure, which had been carefully maintained through the entire conversation, cracked at exactly that point. Not into weeping into something that looked more like the specific physical relief of a weight being shifted. Her shoulders moved. She pressed one hand flat on the desk and held it there. Why, she said. You don't know me. Because you refiled, Liam said. That took more courage than anything I did. You already had a reason to stay quiet, and you didn't. The least I could do is make sure your daughter is safe while you do this. Diane stayed for another hour. When she left, she was steady in a different way than when she'd arrived. The man from the car wash came in afterward, gave his name as Terry 17. The summer had happened and 21 now, who had never fully explained to his parents why he'd suddenly quit the car wash job he'd been saving money from for 8 months. Terry sat across from Liam and was quiet for the first 2 minutes. Then he said, Did they come back after the first time after you filed? Not to me, Liam said. They came back to try to negotiate, but my boss was prepared for that. What if they come to my house? Then you call me directly, Liam said. He wrote his cell number on a piece of paper and pushed it across the desk. Day or night, and you call Carol, and Carol calls Marcus, and the response time is going to be about 20 minutes, maybe less. Terry picked up the paper and folded it. 20 minutes, and he said, or less, Liam said. Terry looked at the folded paper in his hand. He was 21 years old, 4 years older than he'd been when Brandon Pierce had decided a summer job kid at a car wash was a safe target. He looked like someone who had been carrying a specific weight for 4 years and was very carefully considering the possibility of setting it down. Okay, Terry said, I'm in. At 4 o'clock, something happened that nobody in Red Mesa had seen before and that most people would talk about for years afterward. Marcus Reed stood in the parking lot of Walker's Repair, and about 60 of the riders formed a loose assembly around him, the ones who were still in close range. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He said, we're going to make some visits. Not to Brandon Pierce, not to Gerald Pierce, to the businesses on Mesa Road and the 3 adjacent streets. The diner, the hardware store, the pharmacy, the insurance office, the laundromat, every small business within 6 blocks of the shop. The riders went in 2s and 3s, unhurried, walked through the door, introduced themselves to whoever was at the counter and said, and this is what people would repeat later. The specific words, we want you to know we're here. If anyone has a problem they haven't been able to address, they can talk to us. Some of those businesses had problems they hadn't been able to address. By 6 o'clock, Carol Reeves had received 9 additional calls. Not everyone had been a direct Brandon Pierce situation. Some of them were Pierce family businesses using city council positions to block permits, to slow inspections, to quietly starve competitors they found inconvenient. Small things done with patience over years in the confidence that each individual target was too isolated and too small to push back effectively. 9 calls in 2 hours. Daniel stood in the office doorway when Carol told him, and he said, 9. So far, Carol said. How many can you handle? I'll need help, she said. I know people. She was already on her phone. Liam heard all of this from the bay where he was absurdly finishing the last of the day's scheduled work because the bikes didn't stop needing maintenance, just because the world had reorganized itself around them. He was doing an oil change on a regular customer's Honda when Marcus came in and stood next to the lift the same way Walt had that morning, in the comfortable manner of someone keeping company. 9 calls, Liam said. I heard, Marcus said. You expected that. Marcus tilted his head slightly. I expected something like it. Places like this, where one family has run things long enough, there's always more under the surface than what shows. You just need to give people a door. He looked at the oil change. You plan on finishing tonight. Probably another hour of work, Liam said. Wow. I want you to come eat dinner with us, Marcus said. Not a meeting, just dinner. I think you've been working since before 6 this morning, and you should eat. It was the simplicity of it that got him. Not a debrief, not a strategy session, just dinner. Just the recognition that the 23-year-old in the middle of all this had been running on adrenaline since Tuesday and needed to eat. Yeah, Liam said, give me an hour. They ate at the diner 2 blocks down a long table that the owners had pushed together without being asked because they'd seen the motorcycles all day and had heard through the afternoon what was happening. And when Marcus had walked in and asked if they could accommodate a large group, the woman at the register had said yes before he finished the sentence. Liam sat between Walt and a rider named Carla, who had driven up from Tucson and who turned out to be a retired school teacher who rode on weekends and had been with the chapter's auxiliary for 15 years. She asked Liam about his mother and what she did and whether she knew what her son had started, and Liam said he hadn't told her everything yet, and Carla said she should probably know. She raised you, Carla said. She gets credit for the fact that you didn't back down. Liam thought about that. His mother, who worked 2 days a week at the library and worried about the fence and called every night at 8, who had held everything together in the 8 months since his father died with the specific competence of a person who has no alternative to competence, who had never in her life had someone stand behind her the way Diane's daughter would have someone at the school gate tomorrow morning. He ate his dinner and listened to the table around him. They talked about everything except what was happening, road conditions coming in someone's bike, that had developed an intermittent electrical problem, an argument about the best route from Flagstaff in summer. Normal conversation, deliberate probably, the specific human skill of being able to set down the large thing for an hour and just exist. At 9 o'clock, Liam's phone rang, unknown number. He almost didn't answer. He answered. Brandon Pierce's voice on the other end. Not the casual Brandon from the garage, not the controlled pressure Brandon from the lot. Something rawer, something that sounded like a man who had been sat in a room with a lawyer for 6 hours and had finally been left alone with a phone. I want to ask you something, Brandon said. Liam said nothing. Why didn't you just take the money, Brandon said. My father's offer was real. It would have taken care of you for a long time. Why didn't you? He stopped. Started again. What are you doing this for? What do you actually get out of this? Liam sat at the diner table with the conversation around him, going quiet as the people nearby read the shift in his posture. You went after 12 people, Liam said. 12 people who were just working, who never did anything to you. You did it because you could and because nobody stopped you. He paused. I get to be the person who stopped you. Silence on the line. That's it, Brandon said. That's it. Another silence. Longer. My father's going to, Brandon started. Brandon, Liam said, call your lawyer. Don't call me again. He ended the call. Marcus was looking at him from across the table. He'd heard enough to know. Him, Marcus asked. Him, Liam said. Marcus picked up his coffee. Good, he said. That call means he's scared. Scared people make mistakes. He set the cup down. He'll make one more before this is over. Let him. Liam put his phone back in his pocket. He looked around the diner table, Walt, Carla, and 3 other riders whose names he'd learned in the last hour. Daniel at the far end talking to Marcus's road captain. People who had driven hours to sit in this town and put themselves in the middle of something because a man they trusted had made a phone call and said there was a problem. He thought about being alone in the garage 6 days ago. Kyle's grip on his arm, the tool chest hitting the floor. I thought about 9 phone calls to Carol Reeves in 2 hours. He thought about Diane's face when he told her about the school. He thought about Terry folding a piece of paper with a phone number on it and putting it in his pocket like it was something he planned to keep. The check came and 3 people argued about it, which was the most normal thing that had happened all day, and Liam found himself laughing, actually laughing for the first time in a week. Carla laughed too. Even Daniel at the end of the table looked up at the sound, and something in his face eased slightly. Outside Mesa Road was still and quiet under the Arizona night sky. The motorcycles stood in their rows. The town of Red Mesa was going to bed without knowing that by morning everything Gerald Pierce had built over 25 years was going to start being looked at under a different light. And somewhere in a house on the expensive side of town, Brandon Pierce sat with his phone in his hand, knowing that he had called the wrong person and said the wrong thing, and it was all on record. He had wanted to know what Liam Carter got out of this. What Liam Carter got was this: he got to be the person who stood where 12 others hadn't been able to stand. He got to be the reason the line held. What Brandon Pierce was about to find out, what Gerald Pierce was about to find out, was that a line once held does not just stay where it is, it moves forward. Liam didn't sleep well that night, which surprised him because the night before he'd slept deeply. This time his mind kept running the phone call back. Brandon's voice stripped of its performance. What are you doing this for? What do you actually get out of this? He turned the question over, not because it bothered him, but because something about it felt important in a way he hadn't finished processing yet. I was at the shop by 5:45. The motorcycles were still there. Not all of them. Some riders had found places to stay. A motel 20 minutes out. A couple of chapter members who apparently had family connections in the area. But enough remained that the road in front of the shop was still transformed. Someone had left a paper coffee cup on the bench outside the bay door, which meant at least one rider had been there through the night. He unlocked the bay and started the first job of the day, which was a routine service on a truck belonging to a man named Ed Garza, who'd been bringing his vehicles to Daniel for 11 years. Routine helped. The specific physical logic of maintenance work, the sequence of steps, the tactile confirmation of each completed task, gave his hands something to do and gave his brain just enough occupation to stop spinning. Daniel arrived at 6:58. He looked at Liam, looked at the truck on the lift, looked at the coffee in Liam's hand that was clearly not the first one. You slept, Daniel said. It was not a question. It was the polite version of you didn't sleep. Some, Liam said. Daniel hung up his jacket and started the office coffee maker. He came back out. Carol called me at 11 last night, he said. Then again at 6 this morning. Liam lowered the impact wrench. What happened at 11? Gerald Pierce's attorney sent Carol a formal letter. Daniel said, cease and desist on further collection of complainant statements. The argument being that Carol is engaged in organized interference with private legal matters. Can they make that stick? No, Daniel said flatly. Carol's response was ready before the letter finished printing. She'd anticipated it. She told me she's been waiting for exactly this move for 18 months. He almost smiled. She called it a gift. Their words on record characterizing 12 legitimate complaints as private legal matters that shouldn't be discussed. Liam processed that. In 6 this morning, Daniel's expression shifted slightly. The almost smile went away. That's more complicated. He leaned against the workbench. Someone contacted the Arizona State Licensing Board last night, filed an anonymous complaint against this shop. Alleged improper disposal of hazardous materials, falsified service records, unlicensed work performed on commercial vehicles. Liam set the wrench down completely. That's all false. Every word, Daniel said. I keep records going back 9 years. The hazardous disposal contracts are documented. Every commercial job has the correct certification attached. He paused. But a licensing complaint triggers a mandatory inspection, which has to be scheduled within 72 hours. Which means someone from the board shows up, pokes around, and even if they find nothing, and they will find nothing, the shop is under a cloud while it's happening. It's retaliation, Liam said. It's Gerald Pierce reminding me that he has more tools than Brandon did. Daniel's voice was steady, but Liam heard something underneath it. Not fear, the specific tiredness of a man who had built something carefully over many years and was now watching someone try to dismantle it from the outside as a chess move. He can't come at you directly. Marcus made that cost too high, so he comes at the thing closest to you. Liam stood with that for a moment. The shop, the 2 years he'd spent here, Daniel's 9 years of records, the faded sign outside that had been there long before Liam arrived, and that represented everything Daniel had chosen to build after putting down the other life. I'm sorry, Liam said. This is on me. You shouldn't be paying for what I started. Daniel looked at him sharply. Don't do that. Daniel. Don't, Daniel said again. His voice had an edge now that Liam had never heard before. What you started is called not backing down. And what's happening to this shop right now is called being targeted by a man who cannot tolerate that someone said no to him. Those are two different things, and I will not let you conflate them in my presence. He held Liam's eyes for a moment. Understood. Yes, Liam said quietly. Good. Daniel straightened. I called Marcus at 6:15. He's already on it. What does on it look like for a licensing board complaint? It looks like Marcus knowing a woman named Patricia Holt, who has been on the state licensing board for 11 years and who, when Marcus called her this morning, pulled in the complaint file and noted that it was filed anonymously from an IP address associated with a law firm in Phoenix that is publicly listed as retained counsel for Pierce Family Holdings. Daniel said this without inflection. Patricia Holt does not appreciate anonymous bad faith complaints filed from law firm IP addresses. She told Marcus the inspection will happen, because it has to, but that she will be conducting it personally. Liam stared at him. The board member is coming herself. On Monday, Daniel said. She said she wanted to make sure it was done correctly. The weight of what Daniel had just described settled over Liam slowly. The Pierce family had used the licensing board as a weapon, a routine move in their playbook, probably done it before to other people, and it had run headlong into the fact that Marcus Reed had a 30-year network, and that network had a note on the licensing board. How many people does Marcus know? Liam said. Daniel picked up his coffee. In my experience, enough. At 9 o'clock, Marcus himself arrived at the shop. He came in through the bay with two riders behind him, both of whom Liam had seen at dinner the night before. Marcus looked at the truck on the lift and then at Liam, and he said, Daniel told you about the licensing complaint. Yes. Good. Now I'm going to tell you about Brandon. He said it the way you announced that a thing you've been waiting for has arrived. Liam pulled a stool over and sat. Brandon Pierce made a phone call last night, Marcus said. After he called you, he called a man named Ricky Dowd. Ricky runs a small crew out of Scottsdale, nothing organized, just enough people to make noise when someone pays them to. Brandon hired Ricky to come to Red Mesa and, quote, encourage the complainants to reconsider. Marcus let that sentence sit for a moment. Ricky Dowd has made this kind of money before. He knows how to make encouragement feel like something else. Liam's jaw tightened. Diane, Terry. And 4 of the 9 businesses that called Carol yesterday, Marcus said. Ricky's crew was supposed to arrive this afternoon. Supposed to, Liam said, past tense. Past tense, Marcus confirmed. Ricky Dowd called off the job at 7 this morning. He called Brandon and refunded the deposit. Marcus's voice was entirely neutral. Ricky made a calculation about what he was driving into and decided the math didn't work. One of the riders behind Marcus, a quiet man named Frank, who Liam had spoken 3 words to over dinner, made a sound that was not quite a laugh. It was the sound of someone who has seen this specific calculation happen before and finds it reliably satisfying. Brandon paid someone to intimidate witnesses, Liam said, and that someone looked at what's parked outside the shop and quit. Correct, Marcus said. Is there a record of that payment? Marcus looked at him with something that might have been appreciation. That's exactly the right question, he said. And yes, Ricky, once he decided the job was not happening, became quite willing to describe the arrangement in detail. Well, to Carol Reeves specifically, who he called voluntarily at 7:45 this morning. Liam sat on the stool and let the shape of this morning rearrange itself in his head. The licensing complaint as distraction and pressure. The hired crew as direct intimidation. Both moves landing inside the same 12 hours, both of them failing. Brandon had spent a night making decisions from a place of fear and desperation, and every one of those decisions had become evidence. He's collapsing, Liam said. He's panicking, Marcus said, which is close but different. Panicking people do stupid things fast. We need to be ready for the next one. What's the next one? Marcus looked at him. That's what I want to talk to you about. He pulled the second stool from the corner and sat, which Liam had not seen him do before. Marcus on a stool in the bay, same eye level, same plain light. Brandon is going to try to make this about you personally. He's going to find something or try to make something that reframes you as the problem instead of the victim. He's going to go after your history, your finances, your family. My mother, Liam said. Possibly. What do I need to know? Liam thought about it. He thought about it honestly, the way you think about your own life, when someone asked you to look at it the way an opponent would. The past 2 years, the work, the shop. Nothing unusual. Before that, a year drifting after his father first got sick. Before that, community college, 1 semester incomplete when the money ran out. His mother's finances, tight but clean. A speeding ticket at 19 that he'd paid, nothing. He said all of it to Marcus. Marcus listened without taking notes, which meant he was either planning to have someone else document it, or he remembered everything, and Liam's bet was on the second one. The incomplete semester, Marcus said. I stopped attending because my father's condition got worse and my mother needed help. I didn't formally withdraw. It's just sitting as incomplete. That's not a liability, Marcus said. It's a fact that explains itself. He stood. Carol needs you to make a formal statement today, written witness dated, everything from the first day Brandon walked into the phone call last night, every detail in the correct order. You are going to do that this afternoon, okay? And Liam, Marcus stopped. When Gerald Pierce's next move comes, and it will come today, probably because his son is not giving him a choice anymore. I want you to let it land without reacting. Whatever it is, I want you to hear it and then call me before you do anything else. Why, Paul? Because the way you react to it is going to matter more than what it is, Marcus said. You react cleanly, it's just another move. You react from anger, it becomes the story. He left. Liam sat on the stool for a moment and then got off it and went back to Ed Garza's truck because Ed was coming at 11 and the truck needed to be done. Gerald Pierce's next move arrived at 10:20 and it didn't come at Liam. It came at his mother. Her name was Ruth Carter. She was 51 years old and she worked 2 days a week at the Red Mesa Public Library, and she did not have an attorney, a formal support network, or any connection to what her son had set in motion because Liam had not told her all of it. She called Liam's cell at 10:22 while he was under Ed's truck. He heard the ringtone and knew from the specific way his body responded to it that this was the call Marcus had warned him about. He came out from under the truck and answered. Liam, her voice was controlled. Ruth Carter had the voice of a woman who had handled a great deal of difficulty without sounding like she was handling difficulty. But Liam knew that voice in every register, and what he heard underneath the control was not okay. There's a man outside the house. Liam was already moving toward the office. What kind of man? What does he look like? He's been parked there for about 20 minutes. He's not doing anything. He's just sitting in a gray truck watching the house. She paused. I didn't want to call you, but it doesn't feel right. Go inside if you're not inside, Liam said. Lock the front door. Don't open it for anyone. I'm calling you right back. He ended the call and dialed Marcus before the phone had fully left his ear. Marcus picked up on the second ring. Gray truck outside my mother's house, Liam said. Parked watching, 20 minutes. There was no pause on Marcus's end. Address, Liam gave it. 2 minutes, Marcus said. Liam called his mother back. Someone's going to come, he said, riders. Don't be scared of them. They're there for you. Riders, Ruth said. She was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Hell's Angels. Yes. Another silence. Liam, what have you gotten yourself into? Something I'm going to explain fully tonight, he said. I promise. Right now I need you to know that the people coming are safe and they're coming because of me. He paused. Are you okay? I'm fine, she said in the voice that meant she was not entirely fine, but intended to be. I'll be there in 20 minutes. You'll finish what you're working on, she said. I'm not helpless. That was Ruth Carter, even now. 3 minutes after Liam hung up the gray truck outside his mother's house pulled away. He found out later from Walt, who'd been one of the 2 riders who turned onto that street 60 seconds apart from opposite ends, that the driver had looked in his rearview mirror and seen them and made the calculation in about 4 seconds. The truck was gone before anyone had to say a word. Liam drove to his mother's house on his lunch break. She was in the kitchen when he came in, which was where she went when she needed to do something purposeful with her hands. She was making a sandwich she didn't intend to eat. 2 riders were parked at the end of the block, visible from the kitchen window. She kept her back to the window while she worked. Liam sat at the kitchen table and told her everything. From the beginning, Brandon and the tool chest and the camera, the deputy, Daniel's phone call, Marcus, the 9 additional complaints, the licensing board complaint, the hired crew that quit, the settlement offer he'd turned down. His mother listened with her hands flat on the counter after she'd stopped pretending to make the sandwich. She was a good listener. She had always been a good listener. She let him finish completely before she said anything. Why didn't you tell me sooner, she said. I didn't want you to worry. She turned around and looked at him with the specific expression that mothers have perfected across all of human history for exactly this statement. You didn't want me to worry, she repeated. So instead you let me find out when someone parked outside my house for 20 minutes. That's fair, Liam said. The settlement, she said, you turned it down. Yes. How much? He told her. She was quiet. That's a lot of money, she said. There are 12 people on a list, he said. If I take the money, those cases go away. Ruth looked at him for a long moment. She had the same direct quality of looking that Liam had, which was probably not a coincidence. She was looking at him the way she'd looked at him his whole life, trying to assess not just what he'd done, but who he was in the doing of it. Your father would have done the same thing, she said finally. Liam didn't say anything. His throat did something he hadn't prepared for. He would have turned it down, she said, And then he would have stayed up half the night worrying about it and not told me that either. She turned back to the counter and picked up her sandwich makings again. Do you want lunch? He stayed for 40 minutes. When he left, there was a rider parked casually in front of the house who nodded to Liam as he got in his truck. Liam nodded back. His mother watched from the porch without waving, which was her way of saying she had accepted the situation without necessarily endorsing all its specifics. He drove back to the shop and found Daniel and Marcus and Carol in the office. The look on Carol's face when Liam came in told him something had changed. Carol had good professional composure. She'd maintained it through everything, but what was on her face now was different from composure. It was the face of someone holding something significant and deciding how to put it down. Sit, Marcus said. Liam sat. Brandon made his mistake, Marcus said. Carol put a printed document on the desk in front of Liam. He looked at it. It was a bank record. He scanned it, the amounts, the dates, the account information. It took him a moment to understand what he was looking at, and then it landed. This is a payment, Liam said. 3 payments, Carol said. Over 14 months, from an account registered to Brandon Pierce personally to an account belonging to a deputy in the county sheriff's department. She let Liam sit with that. The deputy in question handled 2 of the previous complaints, the ones that disappeared fastest. The room was very quiet. He was paying a deputy to bury reports, Liam said. To flag them for administrative review, Carol said. To misfile them, to make them take the specific path that makes them disappear quietly. She tapped the document. This record was obtained this morning through the state AG inquiry. The moment the inquiry had subpoena authority, these records became accessible. Liam looked at Daniel. Daniel's face was entirely still. This changes things, Liam said. This changes everything, Carol said. Bribery of a law enforcement officer is a felony. This is not a civil matter anymore. This is not about your complaint or the tool chest or the licensing board. This is a criminal investigation. She closed the folder. Brandon Pierce will be arrested, probably today. The deputy is likely already being interviewed. Gerald Pierce, Liam said. Gerald Pierce's attorney is going to have a very difficult afternoon, Carol said. Marcus stood. He looked at Liam with the steady, unhurried attention that Liam had come to recognize as Marcus's version of punctuation, the pause before the thing that matters. You did this, Marcus said. Not us. You called 911 from a garage while 3 people were still in it. That created the report. The report created the record. The record created the inquiry. The inquiry had subpoena authority. The subpoenas pulled the bank records. He said each step plainly without drama. Every person on Carol's list benefited from the fact that you didn't back down in that garage. Every one of them. Liam sat at the desk and looked at the folder in front of him. I thought about Tuesday afternoon 10 days ago. The tools on the floor, Kyle's grip on his arm, the 6 minutes waiting for the deputy with his heart hammering and his hands steady, because he decided his hands were going to be steady regardless of what his heart was doing. He thought about Brandon's phone call the previous night. What do you actually get out of this? When is he going to be arrested? Liam asked. The warrant is being processed now, Carol said. My contact at the AG's office estimates this afternoon. Late afternoon, early evening. Liam nodded. There's one more thing, Carol said. She pulled a second document from the folder and put it on the desk. This one Liam didn't recognize immediately. He read the header. It was a civil complaint formal multi-page. This is from all 12 complainants, Carol said. Filed jointly this morning, every person on that list. A civil suit against Brandon Pierce, Kyle Mercer, and Gerald Pierce personally for a pattern of intimidation, interference with commerce, and abuse of civic authority. She paused. Terry signed this morning. He's the last one. He called me at 8:30 and he drove to my office and signed in person. Liam thought about Terry, 21 years old, 4 years carrying a weight, driving to an attorney's office on a Friday morning and signing his name to something that said it happened, and I'm not pretending it didn't anymore. Terry know about the bank records? Liam asked. He knows now, Carol said. Liam pushed back from the desk and stood. He needed to move. He went to the bay door and stood in it and looked out at the road and the motorcycles and the ordinary Friday afternoon happening around all of this. A woman walking a dog, someone backing out of a parking space 3 blocks down the school crossing, signal doing its regular thing at the far corner. Walt appeared next to him. How you doing? Walt said. I don't know, Liam said honestly. I don't know what I thought I'd feel. Relief. Maybe. I feel tired. That's the adrenaline finally stopping, Walt said. You've been running on it for 10 days. When it stops, it feels like tired. He was quiet for a moment. It's going to hit you later. The full weight of what happened here. Give it a few days. Is that what happened to you after whatever things you were part of? Walt considered that. Yeah, he said. Some version of it. He put his hands in his jacket pockets. The things you carry from standing up for something are a lot lighter than the things you carry from not standing up. That's all I know for sure. Liam looked at the road. At 3:47 that afternoon, Brandon Pierce was arrested at his family home. Liam found out because Santos called him directly. She didn't have to do that. She did it anyway. He's been taken in, she said. Bribery of a public officer obstruction witness, tampering the tampering charge is from the Ricky Dowd arrangement. His lawyer is already there. A pause. I thought you'd want to know. The deputy, Liam said. The one Brandon paid. Administrative leave pending the investigation, Santos said. He won't be handling any cases. Another pause, and this one had something in it that sounded almost personal. I've worked in this department for 12 years, Liam. I did not know about the payments. I want you to know that. I believe you, Liam said, and he did. By 5 o'clock, the news had moved through Red Mesa with the speed of news in a town of 8,000, which is faster than most people expect, and slower than the internet, but with a permanence that neither has. Gerald Pierce had not been arrested, but his name was attached to a civil suit that was now a matter of public record, and his son was in custody. In the particular aura that the Pierce family had maintained for 25 years in this county, the sense of untouchability, the assumption that what they wanted would simply be arranged, that the spaces between official rules were territories they owned by right, that aura had cracked in a single afternoon in a way that everyone could see. Liam was cleaning up the bay at 5:30 when the first of them came in. A man he didn't know, mid-50s work clothes, calloused hands. He stood in the bay doorway and looked at Liam and said, "You the one who started this?" Liam straightened. "Part of it started here, yeah." The man nodded. He was holding something, a cardboard tray with 2 coffee cups on it, the kind from the diner. He put it on the workbench. "Thought you could use coffee," he said. "I own the hardware store on 4th. The Pierces have been blocking my commercial permit for 2 years. He was quiet for a moment. "I called Carol Reeves this afternoon." "She's good," Liam said. "She told me." He put his hand briefly on the workbench. "Thank you," he said. Then he left. 10 minutes later, a woman came in. The diner owner, as it turned out. She had a wrapped plate of food and she set it on the bench next to the coffee and said, "You haven't eaten today, I'm guessing." "I had a sandwich," Liam said. He thought about it. "Yesterday." She looked at him. "Eat," she said. She left. Then a man from the pharmacy. Then a woman Liam vaguely recognized from the school district office. Then 2 men together who turned out to be brothers, who owned the laundromat on the corner, who had been paying what amounted to an informal tax to Pierce family businesses for 6 years in exchange for their permits being renewed without interference. By 7 o'clock, the workbench had 3 sets of food on it, and Liam had shaken more hands than he had in the previous 6 months combined, and Daniel had stood in the bay doorway watching the whole thing with an expression Liam had never seen on his face before. Pride, probably. But not the loud kind. Marcus found Liam at 7:15. He looked at the workbench. He looked at the people who had been coming and going. "You understand what you did," Marcus said. It was not a question. "I'm starting to," Liam said. "The big things don't start big," Marcus said. "They start with one person in a room not backing down." He looked at Liam steadily. "You were that person. Everything else was just everybody else deciding they could be that person too, because they saw you do it first." Liam looked at the workbench, the coffee cups, the plate from the diner, the 2 more plates that had arrived after that, a small handwritten note from the pharmacy owner that he hadn't read yet. Small things, the weight of small things. "Daniel taught me something," Liam said, without trying to. "He taught me that you can build something real out of just showing up and doing honest work. You can build a life out of that." He paused. "Brandon Pierce thought that made me small. I think it's actually the only thing that made any of this possible. I had nothing to lose except my dignity, and that was the one thing I was not going to give him." Marcus looked at him for a moment. "Danny was right about you," he said. He walked back out to the lot. The evening air came in through the open bay door, and it smelled like the specific Arizona combination of heat, releasing from concrete in something like sage from the desert edge of town. Liam picked up the note from the pharmacy owner and read it. It said, "I've been afraid in this town for 3 years. I'm not afraid tonight, thank you." He folded it carefully and put it in his shirt pocket. He picked up the food from the diner owner and ate it standing at the workbench because that was where he was and there was no reason to go anywhere else. Outside, the motorcycles were still there in the blue-going dark of the desert evening. They'd be there tomorrow too. Not all of them. Some riders would head home tonight, the business here in motion enough, now that constant presence wasn't required. But enough would stay that Red Mesa would wake up tomorrow knowing that what had started in this garage had not finished just because one arrest had been made. Gerald Pierce was still out there. The civil suit was still pending. The licensing inspection was Monday. There were 9 businesses that had called Carroll with their own complaints. There was a county system that needed to be examined for what else the paid deputy had made disappear. It was not over. But the thing that had been solid, the assumption that people like Liam Carter were alone in the world, that showing up to work and doing honest things and having no family name attached to you meant you could be moved, could be humiliated, could be managed with a threat or a settlement or a gray truck parked in front of your mother's house that was broken. And what Brandon Pierce had never understood, what Gerald Pierce was now learning at significant cost, was that once that thing breaks, it doesn't go back together the same way. The line had moved. And everyone in Red Mesa who had been standing on the wrong side of it was about to find out what that meant. The weekend after Brandon Pierce's arrest, Red Mesa did something it had not done in a long time. It talked, not quietly, not in the careful sideways way that people talk in small towns, where the wrong word reaches the wrong ear and something disappears from your permit application or your loan gets held up for another review cycle. It talked out loud in the diner, in the hardware store, and the parking lot of the grocery, and the steps of the library where Ruth Carter worked her Tuesday shifts. People said things they had been storing for years. They said them to neighbors, to strangers, to Carol Reeves, who was fielding calls from 8 in the morning until past 9 at night, and who had called in 2 colleagues from Flagstaff because she could not handle the volume alone. Liam heard about it, secondhand mostly. He was at the shop. He worked through the weekend because the work was there, and because working was the thing that kept him from floating off into the unreality of what was happening around him. The brake job from Thursday that had been interrupted by the general upheaval of the universe got finished Saturday morning. An engine diagnostic in the afternoon, a tire rotation and balance on a Sunday that belonged to a retired postal worker named Hector, who had no idea about any of what had happened and just needed his tires rotated, and was pleasantly surprised that it only took 40 minutes. Marcus had sent most of the riders home Friday night. Not all of them. Walt stayed, Carla stayed, 6 others whose names Liam had learned over the course of the week and who had quietly become part of the texture of the shop in a way that surprised him, not intrusive, just present. Walt had started helping with jobs again, not taking over, just handing tools and asking questions in the way of someone who misses the work. Daniel didn't object. The shop had more hands than it needed and more coffee than it had ever had, and a workbench covered in food that the neighborhood kept replenishing in a way that had become slightly overwhelming. Sunday evening, Daniel told Liam to come inside the office. I'd had 2 things on the desk. The first was the inspection report from Patricia Holt, who had arrived Monday as promised and spent 3 hours going through every record, every disposal contract, every service log in the shop's history. She had found nothing wrong. Less than nothing, she had told Daniel, according to what Daniel now told Liam, that the record keeping at Walker's Repair was some of the cleanest she had seen in 11 years of inspections, and that the anonymous complaint had been a transparent attempt at harassment, and that she intended to file a formal note in the complaint record identifying it as such. The complaint is dismissed, Daniel said, with a notation. What does the notation say? Daniel turned the report around and let Liam read the relevant paragraph. It said in bureaucratic language that nonetheless managed to land with some force that the anonymous complaint appeared to have been filed in bad faith by a party seeking to use the licensing process as a tool of intimidation, and that such use was a misappropriation of public administrative resources, and that the board was referring the matter to the state attorney general's office for review. Liam set the report down. Gerald Pierce used a public board to come after you, and now the public board is reporting him to the AG. It would appear so, Daniel said. How does he keep finding ways to make it worse? Desperation, Daniel said. The same reason Brandon kept making it worse. When people who've never faced real accountability start to feel it, they push harder on the tools they've always used. They don't know what else to do. He leaned back in his chair. The tools were always legitimate to them because no one had ever shown them the tools could be turned around. He put the second thing on the desk. It was not a document. It was a photograph printed on regular paper the way you print something from your own computer. The quality was not great, but Liam could see it clearly enough. It was Daniel, a younger Daniel, significantly younger, maybe 30, 32, standing with a group of men in front of a row of motorcycles on what looked like an open road somewhere flat and endless. He was laughing at something off camera. He looked like someone who was entirely at home in the world he was standing in. Marcus was standing next to him. Both of them young, both of them clearly in the middle of a life that had not yet turned toward what it would eventually become. The photograph had the specific quality of something that had been kept carefully. The edges were still clean. The color hadn't faded much. "Where did this come from?" Liam asked. "Marcus left it," Daniel said. "He found it somewhere in his records. He said he thought I should have it." He looked at the photograph for a moment. "I don't have many from that time. I made a choice not to carry a lot of it with me." "Do you regret that?" Liam asked. "Leaving." Daniel was quiet. He looked at the photograph with the expression of a man examining something he has thought about many times and arrived at the same conclusion each time, not because the conclusion is comfortable, but because it is true. "I regret some specific things," he said. "The way I did some of what I did before I left. The years it took me to understand the difference between loyalty to a group and loyalty to what the group was supposed to stand for." He picked up the photograph. "I don't regret what I built here. This shop. These years. You." He set it down. "I put down the things I needed to put down, and I kept what was worth keeping. The friendship, the values underneath the noise. The understanding that the people who've earned trust don't stop being owed it just because you've moved on." Liam looked at the photograph, young Daniel laughing, young Marcus next to him. "Thank you," Liam said, "for making that call, for putting yourself back in the middle of something when you'd spent 20 years building a life outside of it." Daniel looked at him in the direct way he had. "You stood in a garage with 3 men who had every institutional advantage, and you didn't give an inch," he said. "Calling Marcus was the least I could do." Monday came in with it, the thing nobody had predicted. Gerald Pierce called Carol Reeves himself. Not his attorney. Gerald Pierce personally at 9 in the morning, identifying himself in a voice that had the particular controlled quality of a man performing dignity he no longer entirely has access to. He said he wanted to discuss the civil complaint. Carol, who later described the call to Liam in the parking lot of the shop with the precision of someone who had been saving every detail, said she had kept him on the phone for 40 minutes and written down everything. "I wants to settle," Carol said. "All 12 complainants. Individual settlements, fair amounts structured properly." "The criminal case," Liam said, his son. "He can't settle that," Carol said. "Brandon's criminal exposure is separate. Gerald knows that. What he's trying to do is address the civil piece before it goes further and creates more record." She paused. "He also offered to withdraw all Pierce family opposition to the commercial permits that have been blocked. The hardware store, 4 other businesses." Liam looked at her. "He's giving up everything." "He's giving up what he can't hold anymore," Carol said. "There's a difference." She folded her arms. "But here's the thing. The question is not whether the offer is real. It is real. The question is what conditions we attach. What conditions do the complainants want?" "I've talked to all 12, Carol said, "and to the 9 businesses. There is one consistent thing across all of them." She looked at him. "Public acknowledgement, not just a private settlement. They want a statement, a formal public statement acknowledging what was done and that it was wrong." "Will Gerald do that?" "He doesn't want to," Carol said. "But here's what changed this morning that I haven't told you yet." She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone and showed him a news headline. A Phoenix paper. 2 paragraphs about the arrest of Brandon Pierce on bribery and witness tampering, charges with Gerald Pierce's name in the 3rd sentence in connection with the civil suit. "The story is already out," Liam said, "which means Gerald Pierce's choice is between a public statement he controls and a public record he doesn't," Carol said. "His attorney understood that before Gerald made the call." "That's why Gerald made the call." Liam handed her phone back. He thought about Diane, about Terry, about the woman who'd run the bookkeeping service and the note left on her car listing her daughter's school. He thought about what public acknowledgement meant to people who had been told implicitly and repeatedly that what happened to them was either their fault or too small to matter. Tell him yes, Liam said, with the public statement as a non-negotiable condition. Not a vague apology, specific. What was done to whom and that it was wrong. Carol nodded. She was already picking up her phone to call Gerald's attorney. She stopped. One more thing, she said. Gerald asked specifically about you. About me. He asked if you were part of the settlement discussion, if there was something you personally required. She looked at him steadily. I told him I'd ask. Liam thought about it. The settlement Gerald had offered through Brandon 10 days ago in a parking lot, the money, the business accounts, the 2 years of guaranteed work. He'd turned it down then, and he hadn't regretted it once. Tell him I don't want money, Liam said. Tell him I want him to look at the list of 12 people and understand that every one of them was a person he treated like a problem to be managed, instead of a human being with a life that mattered. Tell him that's what I want him to carry. Carol looked at him for a long moment. I'll tell him exactly that, she said. The settlement was signed 11 days later. All 12 complainants, all 9 businesses. The public statement from Gerald Pierce was 2 pages long, and it named what had been done, and it named the people it had been done to, and it said the word wrong in 3 separate paragraphs. It was published in the county paper and submitted into the court record. Gerald Pierce stood next to his attorney when it was released and did not look at the cameras, but he did not deny anything in it. Brandon Pierce entered a formal plea agreement 2 weeks after that. The bribery charge carried a mandatory minimum. His attorney negotiated the witness tampering charge to a lesser count in exchange for full cooperation with the investigation into which other reports had been interfered with. The deputy who had taken payments resigned before he could be formally terminated and was facing his own proceedings. The county sheriff made a statement about internal review processes that said very little specifically, but that everyone in Red Mesa understood was the sound of an institution trying to get ahead of what was coming at it from the state level. Marcus called Liam the morning the plea agreement was announced. How do you feel? Marcus asked. Like it's real now, Liam said. It didn't feel real until right now. That's how it works, Marcus said. The moment things are actually over is always quieter than you expect. Marcus, Liam stopped, started again. I've been trying to figure out how to say this. What you did, what you all did. Coming here, staying all of it, I don't have the right words for it. You don't need them, Marcus said. I need to try anyway, Liam said. You put yourself in the middle of something that wasn't your problem. People took time away from their lives. Walt spent a week fixing brakes in my bay. Carla drove from Tucson. Let me tell you something, Marcus said. Every person who came to Red Mesa, they were there because they chose to be. Not because I asked them. I told them the situation, and I told them Daniel had asked for help, and every one of them came on their own decision. He paused. You want to know why? Yeah, Liam said. I do. Because Daniel Walker spent 16 years being the kind of man who showed up when it mattered, Marcus said. Not just for the chapter, for individuals, for specific people in specific moments when they needed someone and there was nobody else. He did that quietly without keeping score, without ever once mentioning it afterward. His voice had something in it that was not sentiment, but was adjacent to it. When Daniel Walker calls after 20 years and says there's a problem, people come. Because the debt is real, because he earned it in the old way, which is the only way that actually works. Liam was quiet. The same is going to be true of you, Marcus said. You may not see it yet, but you stood for 12 people you didn't know. You turned down money to protect a line you'd never been told you were responsible for holding. The people who saw that, they'll remember it. When you need people, they'll come. He paused. That's not a small thing. That's everything. Liam sat with that after the call ended. He was in the bay. The truck he'd been working on was on the lift. The radio was playing something low. Outside, the road was just the road again. No motorcycles, no assembled presence. Just Mesa Road doing what it did on a Tuesday morning. Walt had left 4 days ago, Carla the day before that, the others in the days between. It'd gone the way they'd come, without announcement, without ceremony. Engines warming up, and then the sound of them moving down the road, and then the road quiet again. Walt had shaken Liam's hand on the way out, held it for a moment and said, "You need anything?" and left his number without specifying what anything might cover. because apparently Walt operated on the understanding that the word anything was self-explanatory. The shop felt like itself again. More itself actually than it had before any of this started, in the same way a room feels more defined after you've changed something in it that you didn't know needed changing. 3 weeks after the settlement, a woman came into the shop. Liam was at the front counter working through a service estimate when she pushed the door open. He looked up. He did not recognize her at first. Then he did. It was Diane, the bookkeeper. She looked different from the last time he'd seen her, the specific difference of someone who is no longer carrying a concealed weight. Not happy exactly, lighter. "I wanted to come in person," she said. "I sent a card, but I wanted to come in person." "You didn't have to do that," Liam said. "I know." She stood at the counter. "My daughter knows something happened. I didn't explain all of it to her, she's 9, but I told her that some people helped us when we needed help and that we were safe now." She stopped for a moment. She wanted to know who. "I told her a young mechanic named Liam and some people he knew. She asked if you were brave and I said yes." She looked at him directly. "She made you a card. It's in the envelope." Liam looked at the counter where Diane had set a regular white envelope. He picked it up. He could feel that there was something thicker than a standard card inside. "She made it herself," Diane said. "She's 9, so I'm sure it's perfect," Liam said. Diane smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that reaches everything. "Thank you," she said, "for not taking the money." "You would have done the same," Liam said. She shook her head. "I don't know that," she said honestly. "I hope so, but I don't know that. You were 23 years old and they offered you enough money to change your life, and you said no." She put her hand briefly on the counter. "Don't let anyone tell you that was small." She left. Liam stood at the counter and opened the envelope. The card was construction paper, red folded in half. On the front, in crayon, a drawing of a motorcycle and a building that was approximately a garage. A stick figure that was presumably him, tall in what appeared to be a blue shirt. Around the stick figure, other stick figures, many of them surrounding the first one in a circle. And in the large, uneven handwriting of a 9-year-old in purple crayon across the bottom, "You were not alone." Liam stood at the counter for a long moment. He turned the card over. On the back, in the same purple crayon, "My mom is not scared anymore." "Thank you, Liam." He put the card on the counter. He picked it back up. He went to the office and put it on Daniel's desk where he would see it when he came in, and then he stood there and looked at it for another moment, and what he felt was not pride and not relief and not the specific exhaustion of the last several weeks catching up with him all at once, though it was all of those things. What it was mostly was the feeling of something landing. Something that had been in motion for a long time, finally arriving at the place it was supposed to reach. I went back to the bay. He had a full day of work ahead of him. An engine job, 2 oil changes, and a clutch replacement that was going to take most of the afternoon. He put the estimate sheet back on the clipboard and picked up his tools and started. Daniel came in at his usual time. He went to the office and came back out about 90 seconds later, which was faster than usual. He stood in the bay doorway holding the card. He looked at Liam. Liam kept working. "A 9-year-old made it," he said. "Diane's daughter." Daniel looked at the card for another moment. He didn't say anything. He went back to the office and Liam heard him put the card down somewhere on the desk, presumably in a position where it would be visible. That afternoon, Terry came by. He didn't need anything done to his vehicle. He said he was just in the area. He stood in the bay for about 10 minutes and talked about nothing in particular. A movie he'd seen, something about his cousin's car, a question about whether grinding sounds and brakes were always serious or sometimes just noise. Liam answered the brake question and they talked for a little while. When Terry left, he said, "I'll probably need an oil change soon," which both of them understood meant "I'll be back," which both of them understood meant more than oil. 2 months after the settlement, the county commissioner, who had been most directly connected to the Pierce family's permit interference, announced he was not seeking re-election. No reason given. The announcement was 2 paragraphs in the county paper. 3 months after the charges against Brandon Pierce resolved into a formal sentence, 18 months with conditions and the permanent notation in the criminal record that made certain things permanently unavailable to him going forward. Gerald Pierce had not been criminally charged. The civil suit had settled. His name was in the public record in ways that would follow the Pierce family for years, but Gerald himself had not gone to prison. Some people thought that was wrong. Liam heard people say so at the shop, at the diner, in the parking lot of the grocery. He understood the feeling. He didn't entirely disagree. But Carol, when he'd asked her about it in the weeks before the resolution, had said something he'd been turning over since. Justice is not the same as punishment, Carol had said. Punishment is one part of justice. The other parts are restoration, making the people who were harmed as whole as possible, and accountability, making sure the record says what happened. Brandon is being punished. Gerald is being held accountable in the civil record in ways he cannot undo. The people on that list received settlement, public acknowledgement, and restored permits. She had looked at Liam. Is it everything? No. Is it more than they had 6 weeks ago? Significantly. He'd sat with that. He still sat with it sometimes. The gap between what justice was and what it felt like it should be. The specific imperfection of real outcomes compared to imagined ones. He thought it was probably important to sit with that gap rather than to smooth it over, because smoothing it over would be dishonest, and the whole sequence of events from the garage onward had been about refusing to be dishonest about what was happening in front of him. 6 months after the arrest, Daniel did something that surprised Liam completely. He called him into the office. He put a folder on the desk. He said, "Open it." Liam opened it. Inside was a document. He read the heading twice to make sure he was reading it correctly. It was a partnership agreement. Walker and Carter Automotive Repair. He looked up. "You've been here 2 years, Daniel said. In those 2 years, you have demonstrated more ability and more character than I expected when I put a handwritten card in the window." He said it plainly, without ceremony, the way Daniel said everything that mattered. "I'm 60 years old. I'm not going anywhere. But this shop should have your name on it. It should have always had your name on it the moment I understood who you were. I'm late on this." Liam looked at the document. His name next to Daniel's. Walker and Carter. "I can't afford to buy in," he said. "There's no buy-in," Daniel said. "The partnership is earned. You earned it." He pushed the folder closer. "Sign it." Liam picked up the pen. His hand was not entirely steady. He signed his name on the line. Daniel signed his. He closed the folder. He stood and put his hand out, and Liam took it, and it was a handshake, and also something else. The specific weight of a thing passed from one person to another. The way certain things can only be passed when both people understand what they're holding. "Your father would have liked knowing this," Daniel said. Liam didn't trust his voice completely, so he just nodded. "Go finish the clutch job," Daniel said. "Customers coming at 4. Liam went back to the bay. He stood at the workbench for a moment with his hands on the edge of it. He looked at the tools arranged in their places on the chest that had been knocked to the floor, the chest that had been picked up, the tools that had been cleaned and returned one by one to where they belonged. He thought about the stick figure drawing in the red card, the circle of stick figures around it. You were not alone. I thought about what Marcus had said. When you need people, they'll come. He thought about his father, who had shown up every morning for 30 years and fixed things that other people own and had never asked for recognition, and who had given his son, by example, the specific understanding that the dignity of honest work is not something anyone else gets to take from you. He picked up his tools. He got back to the clutch job because the customer was coming at 4, and the customer trusted them with their vehicle, and that trust was real, and it deserved the full weight of his attention. Outside, Mesa Road carried its ordinary afternoon traffic. People driving to the grocery, driving home from work, driving to the school to pick up their kids. Normal things, the permanent kind of normal that only exists when something that was wrong has been made right, not perfectly right, not Hollywood right, but right enough that the ordinary things can be ordinary again. Liam Carter had walked into a garage at 23 with his father, 8 months dead, and his mother's rent 3 weeks late, and nothing between him and the world except 2 years of learning from a man he respected and the specific stubbornness of someone who has decided that his dignity is the one thing he will not negotiate. He had stood in that garage while someone knocked his tools to the floor and grabbed his arm and told him nobody was coming. He had stood there anyway. And the truth, the one that had been proven in every phone call, in signed document, in construction paper card, in handshake and name on a partnership agreement, since that afternoon was simply this: when you hold the line alone long enough, you find out you were never actually alone. You find out that the people worth knowing have always been watching for someone willing to stand because they've been waiting for a place to stand too. Liam Carter gave them that place, and Red Mesa was never the same town.